Hello and welcome to the Crystal Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenbrook, and in today's podcast I'll be looking over the game against Everton by bringing you my match review, player rankings and my man of the match. As well as this, I'm also going to bring you interviews with Hodgson, Vicente Guaita and Scott Dann after the game. So let's begin. Crystal Palace hosted Everton on Saturday in a quiet game that saw two sides cancel one another out to finish the match with a fair point each. Starting at a faster pace than it would go on to continue, the game got rolling with an action-packed start as Christian Benteke burst his way towards Jordan Pickford's goal just seconds after play commencing. However, the raised flag of the linesman denied him from capitalising on a loose ball after his illegal shot deflected off Pickford's chest. At the other end of the pitch, Dominic Calvert-Lewin found himself in a similar position, although onside, and could only strike tamely into the low hands of Vicente Guaita. The effort was the first in a series of attacks launched by the typically top-heavy Everton side, and the Eagles were penned in for the first 15 minutes of play. A flush at goal showed its head for Palace during a rare spell in the top of his half, as Aaron Wan-Bissaka showed his experience going forward by jinking along the right wing before crossing across the edge of the penalty area. Shaping up to strike the rebound, Luka Milivojevic volleyed well over to put an end to the Eagles' charge. James Macarthur looked to capitalise on another brief positive spell for Palace, but struck from within the box directly at Pickford, who stood firmly at his near post. All in all though, on the balance, the first half swung the visitors' way, and Marcus Silva's men ended half-time, perhaps questioning how they hadn't found the back of Palace's net. The South Londoners opened the second half looking more energised, and Max Meier sought to find a teammate in the Everton box. However, his effort was sent into touch by a forest of sprawling legs. On the other side of the box, Macarthur took a more direct approach and fired straight at goal, but could only find the side netting. The missed chances were almost cruelly ruled a few minutes later once Everton had refound their rhythm in the game, and Bernard cannoned an effort off Palace's post. Guaita stumped with the shot flying through a sea of bodies blocking his sight. Swapping flanks, Macarthur angled his third effort at the near post when he twisted to play the ball into the box, only for Kurt Zouma to edge it out of play. Palace's stance in the game began to strengthen as the match showcased a little more gusto from the red and blue, and the Eagles' best chance of the half seemed to arise when Cheikh Kouyaté found the ball at his feet and space surrounding him on the edge of the box. However, his smart through ball to play Benteke in one-on-one was overhit and ran out of play for a disappointing goal kick. The game's most remarkable moment then sparked the crowd into alertness as substitute Cenk Tosun launched a smart finish at goal with the back of his heel, only to be denied by the almost superhuman reflexes from Guaita in goal, who somehow launched an arm up to clip the eye-catching effort to safety. Hitting the woodwork for the second time in the clash, Everton's Luca Digne whipped a crossover into the box which pinged off the far post before being sent to safety by the Palace back line. But it wasn't to be for either side as Lee Mason blew his whistle to signal the end of the quiet game that ended in the fashion it deserved to, a goalless draw. So I'm now going to move on to my player ratings, but before I start, don't forget you can follow us on both Twitter and Facebook at Crystal Palace for all latest Palace news. So if you are someone like me who does like to follow a vast array of Palace accounts on both Twitter and Facebook, then of course do head over to the respective sites and follow our account at Crystal Palace. Now alongside all the latest Palace news, so whether that be about the academy, whether it be about the stadium, even their ladies team as well, we obviously do regularly update the account with the latest transfer news, so especially sort of in the run up to the end of the season and with the transfer window or the summer transfer window, opening in a few months' time. Obviously, there's going to be a few rumours about players coming in, players coming out. So if you do want to keep up to date with all of that, then of course follow us on there, because I would say they were quite good at sourcing these news articles, finding them whenever they pop out and putting them up as quick as possible, but also sort of sparking a debate about it, whether we think this player will be good, whether we think, we should sell another player, there's all different debates about that. So if you are someone who, wants a place to get all the latest Palace news, including the transfer news, then of course follow us on our accounts. And then just alongside that, like I said already, the general club news, interviews, whether that be with management, with players, and as well as our opinions as well, because before the game, obviously after the press conference and in the run up to the game, obviously there's a few guys on the page who will just give you their opinion, what they think's going to happen at the weekend, their sort of predicted lineup, and then obviously coming after the game, sort of giving you that instant match reaction before I obviously record the podcast, just giving you sort of a real sort of quick summary of how we thought the game went, literally as it's just happened. So if you do want a place to get all the news, transfer news, interviews, as well as obviously opinions as well, and of course that's mainly on the Twitter account at eCrystalPalace. Now if you do want a place to get all of them, then of course follow us on them respective accounts. Now another great place for you guys to share your opinion is in the YouTube comments. So if you are listening to the podcast on YouTube, do feel free to drop a comment below the video with your player ratings where you rate the players' performances from 1 to 10, and that is of course with 10 being the best. Now the main reason I want you to do that is that rather than me just having my opinion of the game and I go through and rate the players, I want you guys to also share your opinion in the comment section below so that I can come back to the podcast, read the comment section and actually see how you thought the players performed and sort of compare it to my own and see whether we were sort of on the same wavelength in terms of how we thought the players performed. Now alongside that, it's not just for me, it's any other fans who come to the video. Rather than them just listening to my view and how I rated the players, they can also read the comment section, discuss with you guys, discuss with me. So it sort of gives up that little bit of debate. So if you are someone who wants to get involved, whether that be giving your player ratings or how you thought the players performed, or whether it's just certain parts of the game and certain aspects that you really want to pick out on and you sort of comment on, of course feel free to do that as well. And like I've said already, it isn't just so that I can read the comment section and sort of discuss things with you and see your perspective of the game, it's also so that actually other people who find themselves on the podcast, whether they be Everton or Palace fans, they can also listen to me as well as read in the comment section. So if you are someone who wants to get involved, of course feel free to do so. Now if you do want to follow any of the social media pages that I've mentioned or join our Facebook group, then do check all the links that will be in the description below. But I'm now going to move on to my player ratings, starting to go with Vicente Guaita, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now I do find myself repeating myself quite a lot in recent weeks when it comes to Guaita's performances, because over the last sort of month or so he's been absolutely fantastic in the fact that certain parts of his game have actually kept us in games, and this game was no different in the fact that his contribution in terms of the saves he made towards the end of the game kept us in the game and ultimately helped us to go on and get the 0-0 draws. Now obviously aside from that save, which I'll move on to, he actually didn't have a lot to do in the game, and that was mainly down to the defence in front of him defending so well. So whilst we're going to give him a bit of credit for the save he made and how that contributed to the 0-0 draw, actually the defence in front of him, particularly sort of the two centre-backs, done a relatively good job in terms of keeping Everton quiet. So overall Guaita didn't really have much to do, but there was one chance in particular which of course the defence couldn't do nothing about. Obviously Bernard went through on goal, well, had a shot on goal. It obviously hit the woodwork early on into the second half, and luckily for us we were able to clear. So that was sort of one occasion there where obviously Everton broke through the defence. Obviously Bernard hit a shot on goal, but luckily it hit the woodwork, which actually, looking at Guaita, and if you look at his interview he done recently, obviously he always likes to tap the post and thanks the post, because arguably, that could have been 1-0, could have been a whole different game. So arguably in that situation he probably couldn't do much about it anyway, but nevertheless a chance which could have gone in, but luckily for us, quite early on in the second half as well, he obviously hit the woodwork. But the thing that everyone's talking about, and the thing that really highlights how good his game was and how important he was, is the fact that he produced that world-class save towards the end of the game. Obviously I think it was Coleman was sort of doing a 1-2 with Sigurdsson on that right hand side, managed to get a cross in, and obviously Tink Tossen was slightly ahead of it, so he had to improvise. He's done a back heel, which was a really good one, and obviously Guaita, who was only a few yards away, had to sort of improvise, get down low really quickly and actually parry it away. So obviously there's a combination of things there which I was really impressed with. Obviously the reactions from such close range to get to actually be able to see the shot and obviously react to it and save it, but also the reflexes as well, because he was obviously standing up, had to get down low, had to put his arm in such a position that the ball deflects away. So all different things all combinated in what you could argue is a world-class save, because I don't really want to sound like I'm sort of exaggerating it, but that's exactly what it was, because it was such close range so quickly, and because it was improvised from Tossen, it just made it even better. So actually, even though Guaita for the majority of the game didn't actually have much to do, it shows the class he's got, the fact that when he's called upon he can actually stand up and make that fantastic save, and that's exactly what he did in this game here. I've given him a 7 mainly because of that world-class save, and obviously I suppose you could say stunning save as well, because that's exactly what it was, because like I've said already, the reflexes, the reactions, everything about it was good, but also the fact that he didn't make any mistakes, because even though he didn't have a lot to do, he made that save, he made several other catches from corners, a few punches as well, which were, some of them didn't quite have enough distance on it, but nevertheless he got the danger clear. So everything about his overall goalkeeping performance was very good. And once again, I said it a few weeks ago that his saves and his sort of moments in the game actually keep us in the game or stopping us from losing the game by a bigger margin. and this was a game yet again, I suppose in April you could say, that actually his saves has actually helped us in the game. So once again, Vicente Guaita here, going to give him a 7, obviously once again with a fantastic save at the end of the game. So I'm now going to move on to the first player in our defence, and that is the right back Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now, to be honest, obviously I've talked already about the clean sheet and actually the back four and obviously the centre backs, and Wan-Bissaka in particular were quite crucial to that. But in terms of Wan-Bissaka's performance, I've given him a 7, much like he is week in, week out, very solid defensively, done what he had to do. So really, I'm not really going to talk too much about that, because arguably all there is to say is that he made a number of crucial blocks and challenges. You know, that really epitomises what he normally does, and once again here against Everton, he done it again. Now, the thing that I really want to talk about, and the thing that I was actually quite impressed with, was actually his attacking play. And obviously this is something I've talked about this season, how it's developed since the start of the season, and certainly at the end of last season as well. And that was his attacking play. And actually here against Everton, albeit he didn't necessarily get as far forward, because obviously we were sort of penned in our own half because of just how well Everton were controlling possession. But when we did get the chance to go forward, you know, Wan-Bissaka was causing all sorts of problems, you know, in terms of having 1-2s, just carrying the ball forward. And, you know, even though we weren't really effective on the counter-attack, whenever we did go forward, Wan-Bissaka always seemed to be involved in terms of carrying that ball forward or looking to get across into the box. And yes, nothing did come off of them, but the fact that he still had that intent offensively was great to see as well. And I suppose it really sort of epitomises how how much he's improved this season, in the fact that we're now talking more about his offensive play, in the fact that he's playing further up the pitch, he's looking to get involved, he's looking to be on the overlap, all things like this, rather than talking about his defensive work, because that is always consistently 7 out of 10. And, you know, I've given him a 7 out of 10 here because his defending skills was good as always, but that offensive skills and that sort of ability to actually burst forward and create space and all the things you'd expect from a fullback, that was of course great to see. Now, there was one thing in particular. Obviously we had Guaita making his fantastic save. Well, Wan-Bissaka had something which you could even argue in terms of a skill base was even better, and that was that double nutmeg that he made, and it was disgustingly good. You know, you look back at the replays, I think it was Bernard who got nutmegged twice within literally a minute of each other. Once again, Wan-Bissaka driving down that right hand side, managed to get past Bernard, obviously nutmegged him once. Obviously he managed to catch up with him and then nutmegged him again, and actually was able to get to the byline and put the ball in. So just them two occasions within just a few seconds of each other really goes to show that the quality he's got offensively, because I've seen loads of people say he's fantastic defensively, as we saw here against Everton, but sometimes he's lacking that quality in the final third. But that was quite evident to me that that wasn't the case here against Everton, because it was so easy for him, and so majestic I suppose, for him to actually get past Bernard by just doing that little bit of a skill to get the ball past him. So once again here, Wan-Bissaka playing at right back, fully deserving of this 7 I've given him, obviously mainly for his crucial blocks and challenges, but the fact that he combined that with good attacking play when we were bursting forward on the counter-attack, as well as that double nutmeg, which of course, if you haven't seen it already, do head over to Twitter and watch it, because it is disgustingly good. But like I've said already, you know, really good performance all round, and I suppose this is something we've come to expect from him this season. But once again, against quality opposition, nice to see him, nice to see him actually keeping the opposition quiet. So I'm now going to move on to the first of our two centre-backs, and that is Martin Kelly, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now, obviously, talking about Kelly here, obviously I'm going to be repeating quite a lot, you know, I suppose, with both Kelly and Dan, because I think they've both done a fairly solid job. And in terms of actually restricting Everton, and in terms of that contribution to a clean sheet, I think they together done a really good job. So there might be a few things I repeat with Martin Kelly and Scott Dann, and that's just because I think they had very similar performances in terms of how effective they were. But in terms of Martin Kelly, obviously his overall defensive work was very good. But one thing in particular, there was a really dangerous Sigurdsson free kick, which of course we've seen Sigurdsson score many free kicks against us before, seen him score many goals against us. So whenever we see that situation, we're quite scared, quite worried, thinking, you know, he's going to score against us again. But on this occasion here, Martin Kelly done a really great job, stood strong, and was able to actually head away the danger. And you know, we know how dangerous Sigurdsson is from free kicks, so it's nice to see us actually clear the danger. And I suppose that was the theme of Martin Kelly's performance and Dan's performance, in the fact that all of the danger that came into the box, they were able to clear it. But I just wanted to pick out that sort of moment in particular with Sigurdsson, just because of the fact that Sigurdsson always seems to score against us. So the fact that Martin Kelly, when it mattered, and when Everton's most dangerous player, sort of bar Richarlison, was actually on the ball and had a chance to score, the fact that Martin Kelly made himself count and actually made that difference to stop that chance going in was of course great to see. But I do think overall, looking at the whole afternoon, he done a fairly good job, like I said already, you know, marshalling
marshalling the defence, knowing when to go forward, when to go back, making headers, making challenges. So everything about his overall game was very impressive, and some, against the quality of the opposition, yes, people are annoyed that we drew at home yet again, but you've got to look at the plus side. Everton put 4 goals past Man United, so they're no easy team. So the fact that we were able to keep our 11th clean sheet of the season against them and just carry on, even though it was quite a boring game, we were still sort of defensively sound and had our shape. We were nice and compact. That was, of course, great to see. Now, the only real negative I found of his performance, and once again this links with both Kelly and Dan, is just the fact that they haven't actually got that ability to play out of the defence, much like Saka and Tompkins had. And I suppose, if you're looking at this game here against Everton, maybe one of the reasons we didn't play well was maybe our approach, but I've also got to look at it and go, actually, maybe because we were missing someone like Saka, who actually is really effective in terms of moving us up the pitch, carrying the ball out from the back. Maybe because we were missing that skill, or Kelly and Dan weren't actually attempting it. Maybe that's one of the reasons why our counter-attacking sort of style didn't work in this game, because we weren't able to get the ball out of the defence to the midfield, to the attack quick enough. But I'm not really going to read too much in that. But like I've said already, a very solid performance from Martin Kelly, obviously fully deserving of the 7. That free kick, or that header he made from that Sigurdsson free kick in particular, was his most impressive moment in the game. And like I've said already, he could have had an even better performance, and I suppose it would have sort of upped the rest of the team's performance if he had just played a little bit more like Saka. We obviously know Saka's a great player and he's really hard to replace, but if we just had that ability to bring the ball out from the back, it probably would have not only helped the defence in terms of retaining possession, but actually in terms of us driving forward and us going on the counter-attack, it could have really benefited us more. But like I've said already, I'm going to say much the same for Dan in a minute, but like I've said, Martin Kelly here, fully deserving of the 7 I've given him. So I'm now going to move on to his partner, Scott Dann, who I'm also going to give a 7. And once again, a very solid performance from him, fully deserving of the 7. Won plenty of headers, won plenty of clearances, and basically done what he had to do to restrict Everton. So there isn't really too much to talk about there, other than the fact that, much like Kelly, he done what he had to do defensively. But there isn't really sort of any key moments of the game, much like that Sigurdsson free kick with Kelly. There's no one moment in the game that I can pick out and go, that was fantastic. But it was just nice to see Scott Dann sort of going back to his best in terms of his aerial threat from set pieces and being able to defend well as well. So the fact that he just looked like his old self, albeit not quite up to the high standard he set before, but still slowly getting back to his old self, was nice to see. And much like what I mentioned with Kelly, if he had just brought the ball out of the defence a little bit more, much like Saka, maybe we could have had an even better performance, or we could have maintained or retained possession a little bit more, or we could have been more potent on the counter-attack. Because I'm looking at people like Kelly and Saka, I'm looking at people like Kelly and Dan and thinking, if they could just do what Saka did, then maybe we could have been able to, like I said, retain possession a bit better and drive forward. But like I said, I can't really fault both of the centre-backs. They were very crucial to us, obviously restricting Everton, and in the end eventually getting that clean sheet. And like I've said, even though people will be disappointed with the performance, in the fact that we weren't able to score any goals, or we just didn't really look like going and we kept giving possession away, yes, we obviously rightly are disappointed because of that. But then on the other hand, you've got to look at the defensive performance and go, both the centre-backs and Wan-Bissaka done a fantastic job to keep the clean sheet. And like I've said already, our 11th clean sheet of the season, which is nothing, you can't really say anything bad about that. So once again, both Scott Dann and Martin Kelly, very solid and fully deserving of the 7s I've given them. So now I'm going to move on to the final player in our back 4, and that is the left-back Patrick van Aanholt, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now obviously Van Aanholt's been one of these players who obviously was dropped against Arsenal, and obviously Joe Ward played in his place and actually done really well. And obviously, after the game there's actually quite a lot of debate as to how people rated Van Aanholt's performance. Now I think the majority of the people are quite disappointed with him, but then on the other hand there were a few people going, actually, yes, he wasn't still back to his best, but he was still, like I've said many times this season, a step in the right direction, or a step to how he used to perform and how he's played sort of the end of last season. So I personally am sort of in the middle here, and I'm going to sort of talk about the good parts of his game and the negative parts of his game, and for that reason I do think the 6 I've given him is a fair result. Now obviously one of the main reasons why people were disappointed with him is just the fact that he kept giving the ball away quite cheaply, particularly in that second half. But then I suppose the plus side to that, or the thing that sort of outweighs that, is the fact that right at the end of the game, obviously Richarlison's got a chance for an goal, and obviously Van Aanholt's made a crucial block, and I suppose you could say that yes, he gave the ball away, but he made amends with that with a really crucial block, which if it hadn't have been made, we could have gone on to lose the game 1-0. So you've got to look at both sides of it, and this is why I think it's quite divided, people's opinion. Some people think he had a terrible performance because he gave the ball away, but then other people going, yes, that was the case, but he was still better than he has been the rest of the season. And then obviously as well, he was able to make that block as well. But I suppose the main reason he kept giving the ball away, and this is sort of me looking a bit deeper at his performance, it's just mainly down to his passing. And I do think if he could just improve a little bit more on his passing and actually make sure the passes do reach his teammates, or if he does give the ball away, he's able to win it back. If he can just sort of work on these things, then maybe his performance would have improved, because it wasn't just the fact that he kept giving the ball away because he was trying to, purposely trying to shoot, or, just purposely passing it when there's no teammates there. It's just the fact that the accuracy of his passing was quite frankly wasn't good enough, and that's something that really leaves room of improvement, because that's something which you'd expect most players to be able to do. But the fact that he just kept giving the ball away really highlighted, for me at least, that his passing does need to move. And I suppose you're looking at his chances going forward. Yes, he was able to get forward quite a lot, and I suppose you could say he was quite effective in that role, but then he still wasn't as effective as he has been earlier this season, and of course last season as well. And that's, I think, why most people are quite disappointed with his performance, is the fact that, yes, he obviously made amends for the few mistakes he made in the game by making that crucial block, but just on the whole, looking at the performance, I do think, it left a lot to be desired in terms of his attacking play, because that could have been a lot better. And then arguably, you're looking at a few of the chances that Everton had. If he defended a little bit better, then we wouldn't have been put under pressure from that. And if you hadn't give the ball away, then Everton wouldn't have dominated possession. So there's so many different things and so many sort of different angles to approach Van Aanholt's performance. But I do think overall, on the whole part, he does deserve a 6. Obviously, it's up for debate, like I've said already, so comment below with your views. And obviously, I'm sure most people might have given him a 5, let's say, but I've just given him the 6 because of that save he made from Richarlison, or that crucial block he made. Because much like there's been many players, like Guaita, like Wan-Bissaka, if it hadn't been for these little moments of brilliance, then maybe we could have lost the game, or the game could have been completely different. So once again here, Patrick van Aanholt, slightly disappointing performance, because his passing obviously meant that he was giving the ball away quite a lot. But then, like I said already, he made amends for it with that fantastic block on Richarlison. So I do think, on reflection, looking at both the negatives and the positives from his performance, I do think the 6 is a fair result. So I'm now going to move on to the first player in our midfield, and that is James Macarthur, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now, once again, Macarthur, another player who's come up for quite a lot of debate recently, whether he should start, should he go to the bench. And actually, I do think he was alright against Arsenal. So once again, Roy Hodgson likes to stick with him, and, considering Macarthur's played almost every game, he obviously started this game here. And, once again, like Van Aanholt after the game, there was a little bit of debate about Macarthur's performance. But I've given him a 6 because I understand, some of the parts of his game, why people were disappointed, but also, how effective he was, or let's say, what he gives to the team, let's say, as opposed to how effective he was. Well, what he gives to the team, because sometimes people just think they had a bad performance, but actually, if you look at it a little bit more, you can see actually some of his parts of his game were quite important to how we set up. Now, there was one simple save in particular that he actually forced Jordan Pickford to, and that was midway through the first half. So, once again, yes, people are criticising Macarthur, but because we're playing in that compact midfield 4, obviously means we're going to be limited with chances. So it's nice to see Macarthur actually get forward a few times. And as we saw there, he got into the box and obviously forced the save into Jordan Pickford. You could argue maybe he should have done better, or should have made it a little bit harder to obviously challenge Pickford, but nevertheless he actually got into that position, because what we often find when we play a narrow 4-4-2, obviously we're playing with people like Meier and James Macarthur wide, it obviously means they're quite restricted, and because they're more concentrated on playing quite narrow, defending, we're not actually looking to get forward. So it was nice to see actually us sort of break the mould in that respect, in the fact that Macarthur had that little bit more freedom to go forward and have a few chances. Now, there was obviously in the second half, obviously a few minutes in, he obviously hit the side netting, so once again getting into an advanced position. And yes, he wasn't able to finish the chance, but just that attacking intent in a game where we didn't have any shots on target. We had a few shots, but none on target. In a game where that was the case, it was nice to see actually someone at least trying to have a shot through and goal. And I suppose that's the positives you've got to take from his performance. Now, to be honest, this is something which I've seen people comment on, and I really want to sort of talk about it. And this is why I understand why people are annoyed with him. But then on the other hand, you've got to look at it and go, this is because of how the team is set up. Now, to be honest, when you're looking at away games, the way we play, you look at Arsenal last weekend, we obviously like to play quite narrow, hit teams on the counter-attack and actually just be defensively solid. Now, that works against Arsenal, and, you know, James Macarthur playing out wide, especially against a team like Arsenal, that's fine. But when you're playing a game at home and a team like Everton, who, yes, Everton are still not an easy team, but still they should be theoretically easier than Arsenal. You're not that sort of playing that system isn't going to allow you to be creative enough, and that's what we saw with someone like Macarthur's performance, in the fact that, yes, playing him out wide works against someone like Arsenal, but when you're playing at home, when you need to have your midfielders being creative, they're sort of limited to that, mainly because of the fact that they're playing out wide and they're not able to sort of get involved. And, you know, even though Macarthur for the majority of the game was like that, like I've said, compared to some of his other midfield counterparts, at least he got a few chances inside the box, you know, forcing Pickford into a save, and of course hitting side netting early into the second half. And I suppose one of the things that was a little bit disappointing is the fact that, yes, you're playing in that position, so maybe that limits your creative side of your game, but then on the other side, you've got to be able to cross the ball. If you're playing out wide, you need to cross the ball into the box, and when you consider he's played almost the whole 90 minutes out wide, it would have been a little bit nicer just to see Macarthur put a few more balls into the box, because when you consider we've got someone like Benteke in the box, who we know if you supply the ball, like we saw against Arsenal, if you put the ball to him inside the box, he will score headers. When that's the case, you know, if you've got someone like Macarthur who's very limited creatively, his creative side's very limited because of how narrow we're playing, you've got to make up for that, and you've sort of got to find a compromise for that. And if that compromise is someone like Macarthur still playing out wide but crossing the ball into the box, then maybe that's something we've got to look at. And I suppose, like I've said already, you know, you've got to look at the few chances he had in the game and thinking if he had a few more of them, then maybe something better could have come of them. So once again here, James Macarthur here, obviously a sort of a Marmite player in the fact that some people like his performance, some people didn't. But I've given him the benefit of the doubt. I've given him a 6 because he was probably one of our more effective midfield players in the fact that he found himself in advanced positions. But then on the other hand, he wasn't quite as effective or as creative as he normally is. But like I said, I mainly think that's more down to the formation as opposed to his performance. But here, James Macarthur, obviously the first player in our midfield 4, I do think the 6 is a fair result. So I'm now going to move on to the second player in our midfield, and that is our captain, Luka Milivojevic, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now, before I go on to talk about his performance, I might as well talk about the yellow card he got quite early on into the game, and that was for an early lunge on Kurt Zouma. Now, obviously, I do think, you know, making a silly challenge like that, obviously that does deserve to get a yellow card, but the thing that was interesting to me is that there were a number of challenges, obviously mainly from Everton players, after that, which were probably the same, if not worse, yet they came away with no punishment. Now, I'm not going to stand here and literally talk all day about the fact that, oh, maybe they should have got booked, but I just think it once again highlights the consistency that if you're rightly going to book someone else, or you're rightly going to book someone like Luka for making a silly foul early on in the game, then surely you've got to do that for other Everton players. And I don't want to sit here and go through it all, but nevertheless, I do think something like that really sort of could have changed the game, because arguably Luka had to be careful for the rest of the game, obviously, to make sure he didn't get a second yellow card, whereas other players sort of got away with challenges which actually should have put them on that sort of tight rope as well, in terms of, you know, trying not to get that second booking. So I thought I'd just put that in there because I've given him the 6 because I don't think overall that the fact that he got booked for that really affected his performance. But nevertheless, there could have been a few challenges or things where he had to take one for the team that he couldn't do because of the fact that he was booked. So that's just something to consider, the fact that yes, he was rightly booked by the referee, but then on the other hand, maybe other players should have also been booked as well. Now, obviously, even though we didn't have a lot of possession in the game, I do think Luka actually looked quite composed on the ball. So the rare chances we actually got to drive forward and, you know, hit Everton on the counter-attack, I do think Luka was quite composed on the ball in that respect. But also he was quite composed on the ball in terms of getting chances in and around the penalty area. Now, there was one in quite early on in the first half. Obviously, a lot of pressure from Palace quite early on. Obviously, the ball's fallen to Luka outside the area. And yes, he was quite composed in the fact that he was able to get into that position, but then he blazed it over. So you're looking at that occasion there going, yes, it's nice to see our defensive midfielder actually getting into an advanced position where we know he can score from. But then on the other hand, you've got to look at it and go, yes, he's been composed on the ball elsewhere on the field, but when it comes to actually finishing that chance, he wasn't quite able to do that. Now, another thing which I've seen quite a few people pick out, and this is something which really was quite grating for me, is the fact that his dead balls were very, very poor today. Now, obviously we know, I've talked about it quite a lot this season, in the fact that he needs to improve from it, because we know how good he is from penalties. We know the quality he's got from set pieces in terms of, you know, a few of the free kicks he's taken. then obviously we saw against Arsenal yet again, where he can actually deliver balls, you know, from set pieces, particularly that one for Benteke's first goal. So in the last sort of few games or so, and in sort of glimpses this season, we've seen how good he is on the ball. And, you know, I thought Arsenal was sort of a changing point where he's finally putting a good delivery into the box for that set piece, obviously Benteke scored, but also for the corner that James Macarthur scored from. So I thought, oh, maybe this could be a different sort of Valuka here, where he's finally turned the page. But actually all of his dead ball deliveries were quite poor today, and particularly from corners, where we're not going to get that many chances against Everton in terms of hitting them on the counter-attack or breaking down the middle. So we obviously need to find more ways to get inside the box or to get chances inside the box. And one of the ways we should have been looking to do that is from corners. But obviously, once again, with Lucas' deliveries being a little bit poorer than they were, say, last weekend against Arsenal, obviously meant we were quite limited from that. And, you know, like I've said, when you compare the sort of 9 out of 10 quality balls that he was putting in against Arsenal last weekend, it was obviously a little bit disappointing that from dead ball situations in this game, they weren't really hitting the first man, or they were getting to someone, but because there was no movement inside the box, or because sort of there was someone quite closely marking, you know, whichever Palace player got on the end of the ball, obviously meant that nothing came from it. So obviously, whilst his performance was quite composed and he was quite disciplined in terms of having that yellow card, having to be careful but still doing his job effectively, on the other hand, you've got to look at it and go, he had many chances to deliver balls into the box, but rather than allowing us to capitalise on that, the sort of rare chances we actually got to pump the ball into the Everton box, obviously the deliveries were quite poor. So once again here, a performance of sort of two sides from Luka, where some parts of his game were quite positive, some parts were quite negative, but I do think from the captain here, I do think that the 6 is a fair result. So I'm now going to move on to the third player in our midfield, and that is Cheikhou Kouyaté, who I'm also going to give a 6 overall. Now once again, obviously talking about chances in the game, you know, Kouyaté was actually one of these players, or one of the first Palace players involved, who actually almost gifted a chance to Everton. So when you're looking at the game, yes, Everton dominated the vast majority of the game, but actually first sort of 10 minutes or so, Palace were in the ascendancy. You know, we started the game and straight off the off we were actually looking to hit Everton on the counter-attack. But as soon as Everton sort of got into the game, that's when we saw sort of little mistakes here and there from the team, or players giving away possession. And actually Kouyaté was one of the first players to actually get involved in one of these mistakes, and to be honest, looking back at it, he was actually quite lucky to escape from that chance in terms of Everton not punishing us. And that was obviously where he gave the ball away really early on, and obviously that allowed Everton to hit us on the attack. And yes, nothing did actually come from it, but it just goes to show that little one moment or lapse in concentration where you make an error, and especially when it's so early on in the game, couldn't have punished us. But the thing I like about Kouyaté is the fact that mistakes like that, he doesn't seem to hurt him, and he just seems to carry on as normal. And as we saw as the game developed, he was obviously one of our, I suppose, using his tenacity like he always does, and his energy just allowed him to carry on and, you know, basically be effective as he always is in the midfield. So the fact that he was quite lucky to escape that Everton chance not actually coming to anything is obviously a bit nervy, you know, not that great to see. But then the fact that he picked himself up about it and, you know, was able to carry on as normal was, of course, that sort of mentality is what you want to see from your players. Now also, in terms of a Palace attacking chance, you know, we didn't have many chances in the game, but one in particular where, you know, Kouyaté was involved in that attack going forward, which is something he's very good at in terms of driving forward. But the obviously negative of that chance is that he actually played a poor ball into the box when it probably looked easier to find a teammate. So it's just little chances like this where, you know, you could obviously see where the good passing option is, but instead he's tried to, you know, overdo something or tried to overplay the pass, and obviously that chance has gone begging. So, you know, whilst he obviously gifted Everton a chance, he also threw away a chance that Palace had, which was essentially gifted to us. You know, we had a really great chance, and it was almost gifted to us because it was so easy for us to finish it off, but we weren't able to finish it off, and that was also all down to obviously Kouyaté being quite poor in terms of putting that final ball into the box. And like I've said, obviously I'm not a professional footballer, so I don't really want to say it, but it probably looked easier to actually find his teammate than, of course, miss that pass. But the thing that I liked about his performance, and the thing that really sort of pushes aside these little negatives, is just the fact that he got stuck in the game like he always does, using his tenacity, using his energy, using his height, just to get involved in the midfield. And, you know, when you consider that Everton really controlled the game and had all of the possession, I think Kouyaté actually done well in that regard, in the fact that yes, we didn't have much time on the ball, or we didn't have much possession overall, but we were still able to do stuff, and people like Kouyaté were still able to at least make it difficult for Everton in the midfield, which of course is something you want to see. And like I've said already, you know, if he had just that great chance himself to obviously pass to a teammate, if he had just finished that would have been a different story as well. But there was also a chance himself that he got where he actually passed up a great chance to shoot, and the opportunity went begging. So once again, his decision making, yes, he's very good in decision making in terms of his overall midfield play, so getting involved and, you know, putting in tackles, driving forward. That part of his game was quite good, but the decision making was just lacking when he obviously had to pass the ball to his teammate, or when he actually was in a great chance to shoot himself, but rather than having confidence and actually trying to at least shoot on goal, he obviously let that chance go begging. So once again, much like Luka, some negatives, some positives about his performance, but I do think Cheku Guaita on the whole does deserve the 6 I've given him. So I'm now going to move on to the final player in our midfield 4, and that is Max Meier, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now once again, Meier is one of these players who came up for quite a lot of debate after the game, and certainly before the game as well. Obviously people saying, should he start, should we keep with the same 11 that beat Arsenal? So of course there was lots of debate about our midfield once again. Now obviously, much like Guaita, much like Luka, he had a great chance to actually put us ahead quite early on into the game, and obviously he put it into the side netting. Obviously great chance right inside the box. I think it was even within 2 minutes, which showed actually we started the game on the upper foot. We had that right approach, but it sort of soon faded, that attacking threat, as the game developed. But once again, a good chance in the box. He's obviously created it for himself, but he weren't able to be the architect and weren't able to finish off his chance and put it into the side netting. And I suppose it's things like that why people are disappointed with him, in the fact that he had a great chance there but wasn't quite able to take it. And I suppose it's much the same as Macarthur, in the fact that yes, Macarthur forced Pickford into a save and put one into the side netting, but at least he was getting into that position. And I suppose you've got to look at it in the same way for Meier and go, actually, even though it was 2 minutes in and we had a great chance to go ahead and he still missed it, it was just nice to see he actually had that intent in the first place to architect, I suppose architect's not the right word to use and I keep using it, but creating a chance. He had that chance, but he wasn't able to finish it and pull it into the side netting. Now, this is something, the next bit, which people might disagree with, but personally for me, I've given him a 6 because I do think he was quite lively when he was on the ball, and when you consider we were quite limited in the fact that Everton had most of the possession, the time we did have the ball, I think he was quite lively in terms of driving forward, in terms of carrying the ball. And whilst most people go, we're expecting him to create all these chances, be the architect of all of Palace's counter-attacks, and yes, that wasn't really the case here, but I think sometimes people are expecting a bit more from him than sort of he can offer, or the fact that they need to look at the position he's playing, because in this game here, he was playing obviously on the left-hand side and playing quite deep, so you can't really expect him to create loads of chances when he's obviously playing out of position, out wide, and obviously he's had to adapt his game to deal with that. And I think the way he adapted his game was by, whenever he got on the ball, actually driving forward and looking lively, as opposed to actually being that creator in the side. And yes, he's not necessarily as impressive as we've seen previously when obviously we hit Everton on the counter-attack, but I still think that one of the reasons for that is because he was playing out of position, because of course he's very good at driving from deep and going forward, as we've seen, whereas in this game here he was playing out wide. But I do think people have sort of got to give him the benefit of the doubt, because he had a few good chances himself. When he did get the opportunities, albeit limited, he was able to do good things with it. And like I said already, he was still a threat in the side, which could be more so than other players in our team. And I suppose the thing that really epitomised his performance, and one of the things why most people who didn't look at the game in much detail or didn't really sort of analyse all of Meier's performance, the fact that he got replaced by Townsend sort of towards the end of the game, even though he was, someone like Macarthur was probably less effective than Meier was. Obviously people sort of base their opinion on that, going, yes, he's gone off, he weren't that great, whereas in reality I do think there could have been a better option to take off the bench. So I do think people need to base their opinion on Meier, not the fact that he got taken off and the fact that he wasn't really involved that much, mainly down to the fact that the formation doesn't seem to be helping him. And that's something really for me that epitomised why I don't think he done that well in this game as he has done previously, and why he wasn't really as impressive on the break, and that we have seen in other games this season. But like I've said already, looking overall at his performance, I've given him a 6 because I do think that's a fair result. I think he looked one of our most composed midfielders, so alongside Luka in terms of dealing with that Everton threat and the Everton possession and the Everton press, I think he was fairly good at being composed of that. But like I've said already, one of the reasons why I thought he was quite limited in the game is just down to the fact that he was playing out of position, not in his best position. And, you know, I think he's one of these players who can't really adapt that well to playing out wide. He's perfectly fine playing in a number 10 role or playing further deep, and that's all playing centrally in midfield. He's very good at adapting, whether that be offensive or defensive. But actually, when it comes to him playing out wide, he isn't really as effective as he has been in previous games. So once again here, Max Meier here, like the rest of our midfield players, some good parts of his game, some negative parts of his game. But I do think on the whole, the 6 is a fair result, even though people will criticise him for the fact that he didn't necessarily have that much impact in the game. But like I've explained already, I do think the fact that he was playing out of position had a really big part to play in that. So once again, Max Meier here, I do think the 6 is a fair result. So I'm now going to move on to the first player in our front two, and that is Wilfried Zaha, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now, in terms of Zaha's performance, you know, the fact that Everton played as well as they did, and the fact that they limited us and they dominated possession, obviously meant that Zaha was quite limited in the fact that what he could do offensively. But I've given him a 6 because, as he always is, he was obviously our best outlet. But the reason he wasn't necessarily as potent in attack that he normally was, or normally is, it's just down to the fact that he was kept very quiet by Everton, and that's just down to how well they dealt with him, and the fact that we were just limited overall as a team to the chances we had. But like I've said already, you know, you can't really fault him in the game, because I think he tried hard, and he, you know, given the circumstances, given the lack of possession, the lack of times we were able to actually start up a counter-attack, I think he tried hard. He was always looking to actually get on the ball, and, you know, considering we know the skill he's got, as we saw against Arsenal, even though nothing really came off of it and the game still finished 0-0, there were numerous times where he actually had the chance to run at the full-backs or run at centre-backs, and that was fairly effective. It's just the fact that Everton put 2 or 3 men around him at a time and sort of crowded him out and were able to defend against him. So whilst, you know, you may look at it and go, you probably should have done a lot better, on the other side, on the contrary, you've got to look at it and go, actually, one of the reasons he didn't necessarily play as good as he normally does, it's just because of how well Everton dealt with him. And, you know, when you consider, you know, I personally would say Arsenal are the better team. Everton certainly done a better job defending against Zaha than Arsenal did last weekend. But like I said already, I suppose you could look at it and go by his standards, and certainly the high standard he set last weekend, you know, an 8 or 9 out of 10. This was a very poor game by them standards. But then when you think about it, it's just the fact that he couldn't get going, and that's just because every time he went on the counter-attack, he obviously got marked very well by the Everton defence. So you've got to give them credit, because they obviously identified, which is obviously quite obvious, but they identified him as the main threat, and they just marked him out of the game. And like I've said, I'm not really exaggerating when I say 2 or 3 players from Everton were actually around him every time he went on the counter-attack. And I think people like Keane and Zuma in particular, obviously you don't want to praise the opposition, but I am going to do, because they'd actually done a great job individually, both of them on numerous occasions, in terms of dealing with his threat. So whilst Zaha, you know, was quite limited and weren't necessarily as great as he normally has been, the fact that he still tried hard, was still looking, it was quite obvious to see that he was still looking to actually attack the back four and actually get in behind them, really goes to show, you know, the quality he's got. But like I said already, the reason he wasn't up to his normal standard was not down to him necessarily having a bad game, let's say. It's all down to the fact that just Everton were just by far the superior team, and of course defended well against him. So I do think overall the 6 is a fair result. Obviously feel free to comment below with your views, but like I've said already, a performance which could have been better, but obviously that would have obviously meant that the Everton defended a little bit worse against him. So like I've said, you've got to look at it both sides really and go, yes, Zaha wasn't at his best, but then on the other hand, it was all down to Everton defending well. So I do think overall the 6 for Zaha is a fair result. So I'm now going to move on to the final player in our starting 11, and that is Christian Benteke, who I'm going to give a 4 overall. Now obviously when you compare Benteke's rating, obviously a 4, and compare it to other players in the team, when you consider as a team we didn't have the greatest performance, it may come as a surprise to you why I've rated him so low in comparison to other players. And it's basically down to the fact that obviously you compare it to the Arsenal game, and actually he was arguably one of our best players in that game. But then coming into this game here, at least some of the other players in the midfield, in the defence, who weren't necessarily playing great, there were a few parts of their games you could actually pick out and go, that was quite good, that was quite effective. Yes, he wasn't 100%, but still this part of his game was good. Whereas Benteke, I've given him a 4 because he was quite anonymous in that game, especially in that first half, and there wasn't really anything for me to pick up, because obviously we were quite limited in terms of possession and in terms of chances on the counter-attack, but the few chances we actually did get forward, you know, Benteke just gave the ball away quite cheaply, wasn't able to hold at the ball as well as he has done in previous weeks, weren't able to get on the end of chances or at least create opportunities for other teammates. So little things about his game here which really weren't up to standard, And, you know, whether that, once again, whether it's the same as Wilf, where Everton actually defended well against him, or whether just the fact that he sort of got back to his old self. Yes, he had the confidence of scoring, but just couldn't quite get into the game. Obviously, I'll leave that for you guys to make up and decide. But like I've said, very anonymous in that first half. Literally nothing of note to say. And I suppose, you know, when you're looking at that game, he didn't really look like at any point in the game, first half or second half, regardless what half, didn't really look like adding to that goal we got against Arsenal. Because of course we saw how well he played. He got a goal and an assist in that game, and we thought this could be the turning point. He's got his new knee now. This could be, you know, him getting back to his best. But this was sort of a game where he's taken a step forward, obviously against Arsenal, but he's taken 2 steps back here in the fact that he seemed to go back to his old self. And, you know, one of the reasons maybe was the fact that he got bullied by the 2 centre-backs. You know, Kurt Zouma especially done a fantastic job in terms of stopping both Benteke and Zaha, so maybe you could put his performance down to the fact that they were just defending well against him. But I think there was a little bit more to that in the fact that he just wasn't playing great, and he couldn't quite live up to the standard that he set last weekend. And, you know, whether that's just the fact that Everton defended well, or just the fact that in himself, in his own performance, he couldn't quite match it, or just wasn't playing good. Once again, I'll leave that up for you to decide. Now, obviously, one of his main things that I've given him praise for this season, and certainly since he's come back from injury, is actually his hold-up play, and that's actually been very effective. And as we saw against Arsenal last weekend, he seemed to get back to his best, and that was one of the real strengths of his game. But realistically, I can only remember a few times, you know, even 1 or 2 times where he actually held up the ball properly, because the other times he either tried to head it down and, you know, just gave away possession to Everton, or he tried to control it and, you know, just gave the ball away quite cheaply. So realistically, you know, one of his major strengths in the last sort of few weeks or so sort of went out of the window here against Everton, because he just kept giving the ball away, couldn't hold up the ball properly. And, you know, yes, sometimes it can be difficult to deal with the balls, you know, because of how well Everton were defending, or just the fact that because there was so much wind, it made it very difficult because the ball was swaying everywhere. Even though that is the case, you'd expect him to do a little bit better than he did, especially when hold-up play has got to be, you know, I think most people will agree, obviously one of his strengths of the game. And I suppose another negative you could say is, or this is not really down to him, but the lack of balls going into the box. Once again, maybe that affected his performance. But then if we're not able to put the balls into the box because we're being pushed in our own half by the opposition, you've got to adapt your game, whether that be actually coming deep and picking the ball up, or whether that be, you know, you might drift out wide to allow or create space for other players. Whatever it is, maybe you need to try and adapt yourself, and that's something which we didn't really see from Benteke, and that's why I've given him a 4 overall. So overall, I don't think it's harsh, because I do think it really epitomises his performance. Anonymous in that first half, literally nothing of note. Second half, much the same, wasn't any better. Obviously, in terms of having chances inside the box, he was very limited because of how well Everton defended. And obviously the few chances he actually had to hold up the ball, he obviously didn't really do anything with it. And on the most part, he just kept giving the ball away quite cheaply and wasn't really effective playing in that sort of target man role as he has done in previous weeks. So once again, Benteke here, some people might say it's a bit harsh, but I do think the 4 overall is a fair result. So I'm just going to move briefly on to the one sub that Palace made in the game. Obviously, that was Andros Townsend coming on for Max Meier in the 72nd minute. I'm going to give him a 5 overall, really, because he came on, you know, with a decent amount of time to go. You know, normally we bring on subs sort of 85 minutes and above, so it was nice to see us bring on a sub slightly earlier than usual. Didn't really get back into the game. Obviously, 20 minutes or so to try and actually impact the game. Didn't really do that. Made very little difference to our sort of attacking prospects in terms of us actually getting the ball wide to someone like Townsend, him driving forward, getting balls into the box. So realistically, you could argue he probably should have been on the from the start. You know, if we're playing a 4-4-2, why didn't we just drop someone like Macarthur or Meier, and rather than playing both of them out of position, just play one of them out of position and actually play a winger out wide? You could argue maybe he should have started from the game, and probably, you know, yes, he looked a bit positive towards the end of the game, but he just didn't have that end product. And maybe even if he had that positivity and was starting but still was lacking that end product, then maybe nothing would have changed, because that's exactly what we saw from Macarthur, in the fact that yes, he was positive but didn't have that end product. So maybe Townsend starting wouldn't have made a difference. But I still do think, you know, I've given him a 5 because he didn't really make that much difference to the way we played. But then obviously there is a solid argument there to actually say maybe he should have started the game, because we're playing at home and we don't need to be sort of playing a 4-4-2 and be compact like we were away at Arsenal. So maybe we should have changed it in that respect. And obviously Townsend, you know, since his sort of December spell where he was absolutely unplayable, he hasn't necessarily got back to that in terms of the goals return. But nevertheless, I still think he's a good attacking threat, and maybe, you know, considering that 4-4-2 narrow didn't quite work as well as it did against Arsenal this weekend, going into the Cardiff game on Saturday, maybe we need to change it up again and maybe go back to the 4-3-3, which of course earlier on in the season was quite effective for us. But once again here, Andros Townsend, I do think the 5 is a fair result. So I'm just going to move briefly on, just talking about the game, and you know, a 0-0 draw. Don't really want to dwell too much on it because it wasn't, of course, the most entertaining game there. But I suppose you've got to look at our home performances this season. Well, obviously, we've only won 4 games at home this season, which I think is the second worst in the league. And obviously, we've drawn games here and there, but this has got to be up there as one of the worst home performances. Not because of the defensive work, because the defensive work was okay. It's just our overall play in the game. You know, the fact that we weren't really looking to counter-attack as much as we should have. We weren't really looking to finish our chances off. And also the fact that because we were playing that 4-4-2 narrow, it meant that we actually approached the game quite negatively, and that reflected in the performance. Because if we just approached it a little bit more positively, looking to get the balls forward a little bit more, looking to be a little bit looser at the back, which would allow us the ability to actually push up and actually try and attack Everton. If we had just done that, then maybe the performance would have been better. But whilst it was a clean sheet, and that's obviously great to see, you've got to put it up there. You know, it probably wasn't the worst home performance, but it's certainly got to be up there in terms of just the way we approached it. And you know, I think it was quite baffling because we're now safe in the league, so we can now actually experiment. We can now actually chance going a little bit more offensive. But of course, Roy Hodgson decided to go a bit more negative, and that sort of resulted in a sort of stalemate 0-0 draw. Now, obviously, one of the factors, obviously, I don't want to sound like, you know, a few managers here now. You know, you're looking at Jurgen Klopp in particular. You know, I don't want to blame the wind here, but it was a very windy day. And yes, you can understand that would affect the quality of the game because you're putting balls into the box or you're trying to pass the ball and the wind's blowing it here, there and everywhere. But, you know, you've got to adapt to that. If the wind is blowing the balls away when you're trying to play high balls into the box, then you've got to play the balls to feet. So there are different ways to get around the wind. So I don't really want to say that affected the quality of the game, and maybe it did to some extent. But you've got to sort of push that aside and look at ways to rise above that. And we certainly didn't do that. And like I said, it just sort of summed up in the fact that our performance was quite poor, in the fact that our approach, or our lack of ability to change our approach to adapt to sort of the wind and stuff, was obviously very poor. And you know, when you consider we ended the game with zero shots on target, especially at home, is very, very poor. And I'd much rather us have, you know, you're looking at the Cardiff game sort of in December, I'd much rather us have sort of 30 shots on goal and still not score, as opposed to just not attacking them and having 0 shots on goal, because, you know, that's something which really is something we need to improve on. And certainly at home, you know, it's something we need to change. Now, obviously, looking at the game, let's say looking at the game as opposed to the performance and what was done on the field, we obviously pay the opponents at home way too much respect. And yes, I know Everton are good. They scored 4 goals at against Man United last weekend, so they're no pushovers, they're no easy team. But we should have paid them a little bit less respect. You know, we should have played a little bit more expansively, and just rather than us actually just sitting back and hoping for a 0-0 and hoping that we can just stop everything they throw at us, we should have actually thrown stuff at them. And if we had been a little bit more adventurous, then maybe something different would have happened in the game. And you know, our 2 remaining games, obviously we've got Cardiff away and Bournemouth at home. We just need to give them a little bit less respect. You know, being the away team against Cardiff, but being that home team against Bournemouth, we really need to improve it. Because if we want to go up the league, we want to improve our final position, because you know, yes, it might seem impossible now to get top 10. Not mathematically, I don't think, but you know, considering the teams around in that sort of top half are winning, you know, yes, that's a bit difficult to get now. But at least getting a few more points on the board. If we want to improve our finishing position, we need to improve, obviously, our approaches in games. So against Cardiff next weekend, we need to approach it with a positive mindset. Don't give them any respect, and just try and play our own game against them. And of course, Bournemouth the following week. You know, we just need to play at home rather than just playing compact and giving them respect. Try and at least attack them, try and break them down, because that's something that we really need to do to improve our overall finishing position. Because looking at this Everton game here, and yes, they've got the quality here, but rather than us just playing defensively as if it's a top 6 team, we should have been a little bit more adventurous with our play. Now, obviously, the formation which has been quite successful for us in the past was the 4-2-3-1. And yes, we may be hoping for too much because we know Hodgson doesn't like to change. but just allow us to, the final home game, the final home game of the season, the final 2 games of the season, just allow us to enjoy it by actually playing a more fluid formation, which will allow us to counter-attack effectively, but also be compact at the back. Obviously, you've got that counter-attack ability with the 3 advanced midfield players, obviously including your wingers, and of course you've got your 2 sitting defensive midfielders. So that will give us the balance, which will allow us to be compact, but also potent on the counter-attack. So Roy Hodgson, rather than playing a 4-4-2 and just being absolutely negative, being very compact, just try and sort of be a little bit more advanced with your approach, because to be honest, we've got nothing to lose now. We're safe in the league, but it'll be nice for us to actually try and actually score a few more goals, which will help us to push up the league. And I suppose, whilst it's been overall negative, getting 4 points from Arsenal away and Everton at home is nothing to be annoyed about. Yes, you'll probably expect it the other way round, because we normally don't beat Arsenal at the Emirates, or at least get a point. We've only done it a few times, but nevertheless, 4 points from 2 games isn't something to be moaning about. But I think the way it happened and the way we were just negative in our home performance was something which, of course, is why people overall are disappointing. But I want to finish on a slightly brighter note. Obviously, on to Cardiff away next week. Obviously, we wanted Brighton to get relegated, and obviously Cardiff to win their game so they can go above them. Doesn't look like that's going to be happening now. So of course we could put the nail in the coffin for Cardiff and relegate them. Obviously, it's never nice relegating a team, but considering our away records is so good, and the fact that we just seem to we like to play away rather than at home, we just want to see a really good performance away at Cardiff next week. And whether we relegate them or not, it would just be nice to see us score a few more goals, put in a good performance, so that we can obviously improve our final finishing position this season. So I'm now going to move on to my Man of the Match award. But before I do that and give you my Man of the Match, I thought the biggest influence on the game, I'm now going to give you the 4 nominations I put forward for the award. Now, as you obviously heard in the player ratings, in the fact that it was a 0-0 draw, so in that respect, a clean sheet, that was obviously a good part of it. But then on the other side, it was quite a poor performance from Palace, and on another day, if Everton had been a little bit more clinical, maybe they could have nicked the game 1 or 2-0. And likewise, maybe Palace as well, if we'd finished a few of our chances better, we could have at least scored a goal in the game. So you're looking at the game going, actually, yes, it's a clean sheet, yes, it's another point on the board against a team that won 4-0 last weekend. But then you've got to look at it as well and go, a little bit disappointing. So actually, it was quite hard and difficult to pick out 4 players in particular who I could put forward for the award, and that's just because across the field the performances weren't great. But the 4 players I've gone with have showed a little bit more than some of the other players on the pitch, and that's why I've put them forward. So the 4 players I've gone with Vicente Guaita, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Martin Kelly and Cheku Kouyaté. So in terms of Vicente Guaita, I might as well start. Obviously, overall, his game was okay, and he'd done everything you'd expect from him. But I've put him forward because of that world-class, top-class save he made right at the end of the game. Obviously, the ball's come in to check Hodgson, and, that quick reactions from only a few yards out, Guaita has to actually get down low, ping the ball out of danger, and basically stop, Everton from scoring in, with only a few minutes to go. It was fantastic to see. So whilst he made no mistakes in his overall goalkeeping game, part of his game was great, but that save right at the end was absolutely world class. Not just the fact that he managed to get it to safety, but the reactions and also the agility to actually get down and just flick the ball out of play. So for his overall goalkeeping play, but mainly because of that world class save, is why I put Vicente Guaita forward. Obviously, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, like he always is, he's fantastic defensively. This game was no different. Made a number of crucial blocks in the game, a number of challenges. And when you consider people like Gylfi Sigurdsson, Richarlison, these are people, have got massive attacking threats. So the fact that Wan-Bissaka in particular dealt with them when they were coming down his side was obviously great to see. And when you consider, yes, we were okay defensively, we kept the clean sheet, but Wan-Bissaka in particular, in terms of keeping Everton's biggest attacking threats quiet, is why I put him forward. And, aside from that, my second point is the fact that he got forward quite a lot as well. So once again, combining his defensive work with his attacking work, and also that absolutely disgusting nutmeg as well. I think it was on Bernard. Twice within a few minutes, he's absolutely mugged him off. Getting a nutmeg on him and able to go up the pitch as well. So not only was he able to do the nutmeg, but that allowed him to advance further forward and once again, continue with his good attacking play. So 3 things merely for me is his good defensive work, his attacking work, and obviously that nutmeg which sort of ties in with his attacking work because it allowed him to go further up the pitch. Obviously, Martin Kelly, once again, got a clean sheet, and I think the defence does deserve a bit of credit, because obviously I think it's our 11th clean sheet of the season. But I do think Martin Kelly in particular, had a very good afternoon, winning headers, making clearances, basically making life difficult for Everton, because, like I've said, if they hadn't have wasted chances, they maybe could have gone through and scored a few goals. But then likewise, if people like Martin Kelly, Dann and Wan-Bissaka hadn't been up to their game, we probably wouldn't have been able to keep a clean sheet. So you've got to look at it both ways. Martin Kelly, like I've said, overall done really good. And there was one dangerous cross in particular, or free kick in particular, from Gylfi Sigurdsson. Martin Kelly was the man to head that behind. And, considering Gylfi Sigurdsson normally scores free kicks against us, it was nice to see Martin Kelly make himself big and, make himself count in the team on that occasion. So overall, Martin Kelly, for his fantastic defensive work, is why I've put him forward. And obviously, Cheku Guaita here, bit of mixed debate about this, but personally I put him forward just because, the way he was playing in midfield, he was getting stuck in, putting himself about a bit. He done really well in terms of just, running around the whole midfield, looking to get involved, whether that be slightly further forward, slightly further back, to the left, to the right. He was looking to be everywhere, looking to put himself about a bit, and just done a real shift in the midfield. And I probably could have put a few other midfield players in here, but for me, just sort of that energy and that tenacity in the midfield with the way he moved and got involved is why I've put Cheku Guaita forward. But for me, there's only one real clear winner here, and this is someone who's been, last few weeks or so has been consistently in the Man of the Match award, and that is Vicente Guaita. So congratulations, Vicente. You don't get a trophy or certificate, but you do get my sincere congratulations on what was obviously a solid performance from you. But that one save is, if it's not going to be up there as save of the season, it's surely going to be up there as one of the saves of the season, because the reflexes, the agility, and the reactions as well to get down low and just produce that save from Cenk Tossen's. It basically was an improvised move from him, back heeling it. The fact that he was able to react so quickly and produce that save and get the ball out of danger is something I was really impressed with. So whilst people like Wan-Bissaka, Kelly, Guaita made a good contribution to the side, Vicente Guaita, by far outweighs all of them, purely based on that world-class save he made. So once again, obviously feel free to comment below with your thoughts about the player ratings and of course the man of the match, and obviously whether you think I've missed out any players in regards to the shortlist. So now you've heard my match report, player rankings and my man of the match. That concludes this week's podcast. Now I've got interviews with Roy Hodgson, Vicente Guaita and Dann following the game.
Vicente, first of all, a clean sheet at home, but you were restricted, weren't you, by Everton today?
Bueno, important the clean sheet, no? Because another games no clean sheet. For me is good, for the defenders is good, but 1 point is in home is good. Is
The save you made from Cenk Tosun will go down as one of the saves of the day, if not the season. What did you think about the save that you made?
Well, it's goalkeeper, no? Goalkeeper is important save, important no goals. For me, my job is save. For me, pues, is important.
Just finally, Vicente, how much credit does Roy Hodgson deserve for the job he's done this season?
Bueno, it's important. He's good manager, good person. For the club, is important.
Obviously, you would have liked the victory today, but a clean sheet and a point against a team that's been doing really well recently. Are you delighted? Well, happy with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think on the run of play and the way the game went, obviously on the back of the result last week, we come in hopefully full of confidence, but they started well. We didn't really play as well as we would have liked. It was down to them moving the ball well, but yeah, it was a much better second half performance, and yeah, a good point in the end.
How good was that save from Vicente?
Yeah, it was. It was a great save, very important at the time. Yeah, I think at the time we hadn't had too many. We haven't been under the cosh in the second half for too much in comparison to the first, and then yeah, he come up with a very important save, and yeah, thankful to him.
Clean sheet for you and Martin playing in the centre of defence together. We've got real depth in the squad now in your position.
Yeah, we have, and it's a long season, the Premier League, tough. Unfortunately, we lost the two lads who played the majority of the season. But then, you have myself and Martin who've waited patiently for a chance. unfortunately come at the cost of the other lads. But that's what the squads are for. And yeah, like you say, the squad in comparison to recent years is a bit stronger in depth.
And how are you feeling? Because I mean, you're out for so long. Do you feel like now you wish the season wasn't ending right now because you're actually just getting into your stride?
Yeah, I think so. I think being out so long, it was the longest I've ever been out, and in truth, I come back probably as quick as I possibly could. I feel really good. Got quite a few games under my belt now, which was nice. So yeah, once you start to go on that run, trying to improve your performances, you need games, and it's just unfortunately for me the season's come to an end. But yeah, let's see if we can finish it off well.
And finally, it's Martin's birthday today. Did he bring any cakes in?
I'm sure he will next week. Obviously not today, but we'll make sure he brings a lot in next week.
Roy, your thoughts on that?
Pleased to get a point. I thought Everton were good. At half time I was very disappointed with our performance, but I thought second half we did a bit better, there's no question of that. But we were still dependent on our goalkeeper making a wonder save to get us the point, which I thought was the maximum we deserved today. But I must give the players a lot of credit for sticking at their task and sticking and showing the character, if you like, to get through a game when you're nowhere near your best and you're not able to give the performance you'd have liked to have given the crowd after last week's fantastic win. But that's football. Sometimes that happens. You don't always get what you want, and you've got to play the game that's out there to play, and then you've got to deal with whatever situations the game throws up, and full credit to the players for doing that.
You mentioned just then that they were nowhere near their best. Why do you think that was?
I don't know. I mean, the fact is, normally our passing is not that bad, but today it wasn't as good as it should be. The wind doesn't help in these games, but that's the same for both teams, I know, but it doesn't help the game of football. But if you knew exactly why one week you seem to pass the ball well and get into good positions, and next week you don't, if you had the answers to those, it would be a much easier game for us coaches and managers. But as I say, full credit to the players. This was a good point. Last year when we played at Everton, and we actually played well that day, missed a penalty, and we were 0-0 with about 5 or 6 minutes to go. We conceded a goal from a corner kick, and then a last-minute injury time goal. We lose 2-0, and I was obviously happier with the quality of our performance that day. But if you ask me which result and which game do you prefer, I prefer this one.
I know that you were looking for that relationship between Benteke and Zaha that worked so well last weekend to sort of bear fruit again today. Didn't quite work out that way. Do you give credit to Zuma and Keane, though, for the way they played for that happening?
I guess so, yeah. I mean, you always have to give credit to the opposition. There's two teams and there's two opponents, if you like, against you when you're playing as a duo up front. But they didn't find the level that they found last week. But of course there was more space from the last week. They were much more compact, Everton, when we had the ball. And as I say, the fact that the ball was swirling around in the wind made it a little bit easier for the centre-backs. Our centre-backs had a fairly dominant day against their forwards as well.
And a terrific save from Vicente that you referred to earlier from Tosin. Brilliant work from him, wasn't it?
Was fantastic. I mean, he's a very good goalkeeper. He's kept a lot of clean sheets this year, as has Wayne Hennessy. We've had a lot of clean sheets. But I'm just a little bit disappointed that today, after the fantastic euphoria, really, of last week's result, we couldn't come here today and put on a splendid show and send our fans home really happy. That's always a bit of a disappointment. But football gives you those type of games and you have to come to terms with them. It certainly wasn't for want of trying, but we know that as a team in possession of the ball, we can do more with it than we did today. And defensively, to be fair, we did all that was asked of us.
So there you have it. Now you've heard what Roy Hodgson, Vicente Guaita and Scott Dann had to say after the game. That concludes this week's podcast for the game against Everton. But make sure to come out next week for my post-match review of the game against Cardiff. So thanks for listening, and remember to up the Palace.